My fellow Americans,
I can no longer remain in today's Democratic Party that's under the complete control of an elitist cabal of warmongers who are driven by cowardly wokeness, who divide us by racializing every issue and stoking anti-white racism, who actively work to undermine our God-given freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, who are hostile to people of faith and spirituality, who demonize the police but protect criminals at the expense of law-abiding Americans, who believe in open borders, who weaponize the national security state to go after their political opponents, and above all, who are dragging us ever closer to nuclear war. Now, I believe in a government that's of the people, by the people, and for the people. Unfortunately, today's Democratic Party does not. Instead, it stands for a government that is of, by, and for the powerful elite. Now, I'm calling on my fellow common sense, independent-minded Democrats to join me in leaving the Democratic Party. If you can no longer stomach the direction that the so-called woke Democratic Party ideologues are taking our country, then I invite you to join me.
The Vietnam War and the push for US involvement was a result of the Gulf of Tonkin incident. A lie. The Iraq War famously is a result of lies. Wars in Somalia are a result of lies. The Second World War and the German invasion of Poland was a result of carefully constructed lies. That is war by media. Let us ask ourselves, of the complicit media, which is the majority of the mainstream press, what is the average death count attributed to each journalist?
you a question. Do you think you should be the one to be able to decide when to pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Isn't that what this is about? If you adopt the position that any time you are denied, your particular, and there's 4 groups out there, and inspectors, you're the group you headed, anytime you are denied, that ipso facto requires the United States and the Security Council to act on what they said they would do, which is to use whatever means necessary to take on Saddam Hussein so you can get into that particular facility. Is that not correct? Is that not your position?
Mr. Senator, I have a job to do, or I had a job to do, and that was to disarm Iraq in accordance with the provisions of relevant resolutions.
With all due respect, I'm not trying to be confrontational. I'm trying to get this as clear as I can. I really mean this now. You have an absolute logic. You put together a very tight syllogism here. You have indicated that your job is to disarm. The only way you can disarm is to have access. The only way you can have access is either with permission on the part of Iraq, or if denied, forced access, right?
Compelled access.
Compelled. Well, okay, compelled. You sound like the lawyer and I sound like the military guy. I mean, compelled, where I come from, when my old man said you're compelled, it meant I was forced. I mean, it was a real simple proposition. It wasn't much to debate. Now, there is a clear logic to that. And that's what I mean when I say I respect your position. But that means that whenever you choose a target that warrants inspection and you are denied, that ipso facto, at that moment, the only way your position can be satisfied or sustained is if the UN Security Council or the United States, acting unilaterally, uses force to guarantee access. Is not that true?
Yes, sir.
Now, that means that you get to choose the time and place when we would use force, if we use force.
No, sir.
Of course you do. If you choose the site and it's denied.
And we coordinate with the member states to include the United States.
Exactly.
And prior to us going in, we have their agreement that this indeed is an inspection worth doing.
Okay, inspection worth doing, everybody's agreed it's worth doing, and it gets stopped.
Yes, sir.
At that moment, we're an automatic pilot as far as you're concerned. Period. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, I respect that. But now, it seems to me the Secretary of State might have a slightly different problem. Secretary of State might be sitting there and saying, now look over there on that side. Now, I remember so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and the 12 people on this side, they're all the ones that said they didn't want to use force. Now, I'm going to have to go tell the president now that we should, or Secretary Cohen, unleash whatever it takes to get it done. And our military assessment is the same as the majors. The majors' assessment is, privately held but publicly acknowledged later, that airstrikes alone aren't going to do this. Saddam's not going to cave on this. So, now here's the deal. I recommended the president have at it and let the chips fall where they may. A reasonable position for the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State to take. But I respectfully suggest, Major, they have a responsibility slightly above your pay grade. Slightly above your pay grade. To decide whether or not to take the nation to war alone, or to take the nation to war partway, or to take the nation to war halfway. That's a real tough decision. That's why they get paid the big bucks. That's why they get the limos and you don't. I mean this sincerely. I'm not trying to be flip, because I think, and that's why I said at the outset, the reason why I'm glad you did what you did, we should come to our milk. We should make a decision. But in terms of whether the Secretary of State has no more to consider than you do as the arms inspector, you didn't get in, didn't get my job done, get me in. Period. You made the deal, right? That's the deal. A deal's a deal. Get me in. Scott Ritter, I'm ready to go. It's not how it works. Now, maybe it should work that way. But wouldn't you acknowledge that if you were President of the United States or the Secretary of State, you'd sit there and say, now, okay, old Scotty boy didn't get in. We said he should get in. We want him to get in. It's important that he does get in. They're not going to let him in, so what are we going to do now? We know that France and Russia aren't going to be with us. We're quite confident China's not. We've already run those traps. They're not there. We're not sure where the United States Senate is, but have at it, boys. Go get them. And by the way, Scott and the boys say air power's not enough. I think it's a legitimate debate, Scott, Major. I think it's a legitimate debate. But I don't think we should be putting it in the context of you have somebody up there at state saying, look, how can we weasel out of this agreement? We want to let this guy out there hanging. We're not this. It's a very practical political decision. Same kind of decision General Powell made. Same kind of decision President Bush made. Every president, every Secretary of State has to do it. Like I said, they get paid more than you. Their job's a hell of a lot more complicated than yours. They may have made the wrong decision, and you brought it to light. We should address it. We should say straight up where we are, and we should do it. And for that, I thank you. But it's above your pay grade.
Rationality belongs to the cool observers, but because of the stupidity of the average man, he follows not reason but faith, and the naive faith of the proletarian requires necessary illusion and emotionally potent oversimplifications, which have to be provided by myth makers to keep the ordinary person on the right course.
That I'm allowed to ask you this question is because today the federal court ruled that the government doesn't have the right to determine who is or is not a journalist. This is the second election in a row that the court had to overturn your government. Do you still insist on being able to make that decision, and why?
First of all, questions around accreditation were handled by the press gallery and the consortium of networks who have strong perspectives on quality journalism and the important information that is shared with Canadians. The reality is organizations like yours that continue to spread misinformation and disinformation on the science around vaccines, around how we're going to actually get through this pandemic and be there for each other and keep our kids safe, is part of why we're seeing such unfortunate anger and lack of understanding of basic science. And quite frankly, I won't call it a media organization, your group of individuals need to take accountability for some of the polarization that we're seeing in this country. And I think Canadians are cluing into the fact that there is a really important decision we take about the kind of country we want to see. And I salute all extraordinary, hardworking journalists that put science and facts at the heart of what they do and ask me tough questions every day, but make sure that they are educating and informing Canadians from a broad range of perspectives, which is the last thing that you guys do.
Killed a million people in Iraq.
That is a separate...
You killed a million people in Iraq. It's incredible that you have the brass neck to be sitting here now urging another Iraq war.
George,
after
if
what
I was
you've
still
already
in
done.
Parliament...
There can be no doubt that Saddam Hussein has biological weapons and the capability to rapidly produce more, many more. And he has the ability to dispense these lethal poisons and diseases in ways that can cause massive death and destruction. If biological weapons seem too terrible to contemplate, chemical weapons are equally chilling. UNMOVIC already laid out much of this, and it is documented for all of us to read in UNSCOM's 1999 report on the subject. If we consider just one category of missing weaponry, 6,500 bombs from the Iran-Iraq war, UNMOVIC says the amount of chemical agent in them would be in the order of 1,000 tons. These quantities of chemical weapons are now unaccounted for. Dr. Blick says, quipped that, quote, mustard gas is not marmalade. You are supposed to know what you did with it. We believe Saddam Hussein knows what he did with it, and he has not come clean with the international community. We have evidence these weapons existed. What we don't have is evidence from Iraq that they have been destroyed or where they are. That is what we are still waiting for.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function. Let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans, right. You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get
NIH,
one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among mammals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's send Dr. Fauci.
I have to, well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2. That's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well, wait a minute.
It did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally
This committee will allow the witness to respond.
I totally resent the lie that you are now propagating, Senator, because if you look at the viruses that were used in the experiments, that were given in the annual reports, that were published in the literature, it is molecularly impossible.
No one's saying those viruses caused it.
It
no
is
one is
molecularly.
Those viruses caused the pandemic. What we're alleging is that gain-of-function research was going on in that lab, and NIH funded it.
That
you
is
can't
not.
Get away from it. It meets your definition, and you are obfuscating the truth.
I'm not obfuscating the truth.
Senator
You are the
Paul's
one.
time is expired, but I will allow the witness to.
Let me just finish. I want everyone to understand that if you look at those viruses, and that's judged by qualified virologists and evolutionary biologists, those viruses are molecularly impossible to result in SARS-CoV-2.
Those viruses caused the pandemic.
Senator Paul,
We're saying they are gain-of-function viruses because they were animal viruses that became more transmissible and human, and you funded it.
And you
won't admit the truth.
And you implying...
Senator Paul, your time has expired, and I will allow witnesses who come before this committee to respond.
And you are implying that what we did was responsible for the deaths of individuals. I totally resent that. And if anybody is lying here, Senator, it is you.
Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern, both to the press and to the President. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second, to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know.
Hey everybody, on this special Friday edition, welcome into Redacted, all of you rebels out there, wherever you are around the world. I'm Clayton Morris.
I'm Natali Morris.
So glad to have you here on this Friday, this special edition. We decided to do a Friday show because we're going to be off at the beginning of next week, and we thought, well, what the hell? We're here on Friday night. Let's see who wants to watch and do a whole show. And boy, holy smokes, there's a ton of news for us to cover on Friday night.
You know, actually, oftentimes we take off Fridays normally, and then we just sit, you know, and we watch all these stories break, and we're like, we got to get at that. So we're here. We're going to give it a shot this Friday. Thanks for coming.
So we're going to bring you the very latest on the disaster in Ohio. People now saying that this could be the worst ecological disaster in American history. So we're going to dive into what the federal response is. There's a whole bag of mixed messages. Plus, we're going to be live there on the ground with eyewitnesses who are seeing all sorts of chemicals in the water. People saying they're not returning to their homes. Federal officials saying, yeah, sure, it's fine. Go ahead and drink the water. But then when they're offered to drink water, they're like, no, I don't want to touch your water. So, like, what kind of mixed messages can you possibly have? It's really, really awful, but we're going to bring you the very latest on that.
Plus, a timely announcement from NATO that they're going to develop a space force. So, you know, NATO is an acronym for North American Treaty. So I guess, I don't know how that's going to work. They need a new acronym to go into space. Onto the moon because of all these UFOs. So this is such a timely announcement. We'll break that down for you. Yes. We're also going to talk about trans rights activists hating on the New York Times. That new battle heating up. J.K. Rowling smack dab in the center. Hey, the CEO of YouTube is resigning on the very same day, virtually, that we're getting a bunch of subpoenas from Congress on censorship. Could they be related? We'll look at all of that and more as Redacted starts right now on this Friday. All right, I got my acronyms wrong. NATO is North Atlantic. Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I misspoke there. But we're going to see if, you know, it can be like Northern Global. Yeah, because if you think about if it's North American, boy, they're outside of their purview at this point. They've gone a little too far. They've gone a little too far. They're way off. They're way off. Oh, boy. Welcome in on this Friday. Hope everyone's doing good. Chester Wolf the Griffin, thank you for your kind super chat on this Friday. He says, $5 super chat. He says, YouTube is suppressing the live stream. It's not showing up anywhere on my feed. I just happened to come across it. That's proof you are over the target. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing with YouTube, right, and the suppression. That's why we stream both on Rumble simultaneously as YouTube. And frankly, we use YouTube to push, you know, awareness because we want to leave YouTube eventually, unless they can clean up their act. Yeah, we're going to talk about later in the show whether or not the new person who is in charge at YouTube is better or worse than it has been, because we are going to remind you of the rules that we have to abide by in order to be on this platform. We also remind you that we are still on Rumble. Yeah. Go ahead. No, I was going to comment on what you were just saying, because earlier, right before the show, we were having a whole debate, our whole team, back and forth on can we show this particular thing on YouTube? It was a graphic that we were going to show, and like, no, going through their terms of service, it like specifically says if you show this thing, sorry, like, oh, there, I guess we can't do that on YouTube. Yeah, that's what you're not getting, but you're getting a lot more. Yeah. I would be really curious to know if the major, like CNN, MSNBC, like when they show those things, if their channels are demonetized or if it's okay for them. Like, I would really love to have a backdoor access to see if they still get those monetized. Yeah, I'm sure there's like some other tier, but we know that there's different tiers for mainstream media. Like if you're Fox or CNN or whatever, they put you in this different bucket. So, and we know that that's been confirmed from YouTube. Boy, I would love to sit down and have a conversation with these people and do an interview with them and really lay into them deeply, you know? What do you mean? Lay it on thick. Lay into them. I don't know. You're not allowed to do that, honey. You're not laying on anybody. That's right. Okay. I'm married. I forgot. Let's lay into this. I thought lay into. Yeah. I thought lay into was just a euphemism for getting after somebody. Yeah, I'm going to lay into that person. When I see that person, I'm going to lay in. I'm going to give him a piece of my mind. 2 cents. I'm going to give him 2 cents. I don't know. I all the idioms are. All right. Let's. I'm going to do that person some interviewing. I'm going to really nail that person.
It's not working out.
I don't like that. I don't like how that sounds.
It's not working out the way no wonder we're being suppressed. Hey, we got a newsletter, but that's not being suppressed. Go to redacted.inc. It's totally free. I think we had another record signups this morning. We hope we're bringing you value every morning. All you need to do is go to redacted.inc, not .com. You just put in your email address, and then you'll receive a welcome email from me. It'll come from Clayton at redacted.inc. And then on Monday through Friday around 6:30 a.m. Eastern time, you'll get a brand new newsletter. So Monday, you'll get the latest newsletter where we cover like 5 or 6 stories over your cup of coffee. You can enjoy it. Again, redacted.inc is the place to go. Natalie does a lot of the writing on the newsletter, so it has her wit and witticisms in there and her critiques, and I add a lot of the comedy. So anytime you're laughing out loud, it's from me.
You said it wasn't being suppressed, though, and that's not actually right, because Google has deemed it dangerous information. So
that's true. People were saying it was showing up in their Gmail inbox. Google Gmail is flagging it as dangerous. I'm like, oh, the truth is now dangerous? Okay. Thank you, Google.
Hey, did you read the newsletter this morning that showed that we have competition now for married news presenters?
Oh.
Kelly Ripa now is going to get a new co-host. She's gone through many of them.
But she doesn't do the news, right? They play games like spin the wheel.
It's news light. They will kind of talk about the news topically a little bit, and then they go into, I don't know, bits
I don't
and bobs.
think that they're competition for the type of news that we cover here.
Not really, but wouldn't it be amazing if they started to? They'd be like, how about that COVID vaccine? How about anti-war movements? People would be like, wait a minute.
What just happened to Kelly?
This is supposed to be full of niceties. But we'll see, if people like them better than us as a married couple.
I stopped watching them when Regis left. If Regis comes back, then I'll start watching them again.
I don't think that's going to happen. But that is your reminder that our love language sometimes comes across as grating to some. So, that's how it is.
Yeah, sometimes it comes in and out as a physical touch under the table,
That's right. Yeah. Or a kick. A kick from someone.
You never know.
Yeah, that's what I meant by physical touch. I wasn't suggesting something else.
It's an invisible touch. Okay, let's get into the news, shall we? Let's start with the big story, which, of course, what happened in East Palestine, Ohio, being called the worst environmental disaster in American history. Those are the words coming from a number of scientists over the past 24 hours. The federal government, though, and the Biden administration largely ignoring this story.
Yes.
By the way, this is what... So J.D. Vance, of course, is the new senator from Ohio. Both senators are there, but the Biden administration is basically non-existent. A few EPA lackeys are there, but other than that, Biden's not there. Buttigieg is not there. The
Norfolk
NTSB.
Southern didn't show up to town meetings. They're just, releasing statements. They're only speaking through press releases and saying, well, we have another fund. We have another way for you to get in touch with us to get reimbursed for certain things. We're really helping the victims, but not in person. Nobody is willing to actually go there.
So J.D. Vance is a senator. He's the new senator from Ohio, and he's there, and he's showing you what this water looks like. Should this water look like this? Watch.
Hey guys, so I'm here at Leslie Run, and there are dead worms and dead fish all throughout this water. So, something I just discovered is that if you scrape the creek bed, it's like chemical is coming out of the ground. Can you come here? And let me just show this to people. I don't know if you're going to see this on camera, but watch this. Just see that chemical pop out of the creek. This is disgusting. And the fact that we have not cleaned up the train crash, the fact that these chemicals are still seeping in the ground is an insult to the people who live in East Palestine. Do not forget these people. We've got to keep applying pressure. That's how we're going to fix this problem. Thank you.
So the New York Times published a piece today basically saying, hey, there are over 1,000 derailments a year. Like, we shouldn't really be paying much. Come on, let's just put this in perspective. Okay. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was just going to say, it shocks me that they're still walking around that area with no mask. Like, they have no idea what the long-term effects of the gases that could still be in the air could be, and they're just walking around there without masks. I don't think masks would help in that situation, but that kind of concerns me that they just seem to not care that the air could still be bad.
David wants masks now.
Yeah, no, David's suddenly pro-mask.
I think the word you're looking for is respirator.
Respirator,
yes, respirator.
Yeah, we've talked to some doctors who've said I wouldn't be in that area without a military grade respirator mask. in that situation. You just simply don't know. And we're going to speak to Nick Sortor, who's there in East Palestine, and there's no kids around. Like, the kids are gone, thankfully, and people have left and don't think that they're ever going to come back.
Yeah, I mean, you worry about taking showers from, any kind of public utility water, especially because your skin is the largest organ in your body. What is it going to absorb into your system? Not just what you drink or what you breathe, but what gets in contact with you. We spoke last week about how many government failures are all sort of rolled into this one major disaster, but I thought we'd recap. First of all, just a reminder that the Biden administration passed legislation in December to not allow rail workers to strike. Remember this? Here's the tweet from President Biden saying, "I'm calling on Congress to pass legislation immediately to adopt this tentative agreement, because a rail shutdown would devastate our economy. Without freight rail, many U.S. industries would shut down." He says, "I'm a pro-labor president. I'm reluctant to override the ratification procedures and views of those who voted against the agreement. But in this case, where the economic impact of a shutdown would hurt millions, I believe Congress must use its powers to adopt this deal." So this is what he was saying, is that I believe in strikes. He voted against it when he was a senator, but he passed legislation to take this out of their hands. We can't blame Biden for this entirely. This was happening 30 years ago under President Bush in 1991. Congress passed a late night bill. Remember, this is from the New York Times, when they had to wake up President Bush at 1 a.m. Here's the article from April of 1991. Where Mr. Bush had to be awakened in the residential headquarters of the White House in order to sign a bill to prevent union workers from striking. The union workers said they wanted to strike because of pay and working conditions, but they also wanted to protest something called precision scheduled railroading, which has been a technique that companies use to focus on longer and heavier trains, which would lead to bigger disasters when they happen. So this is a big question. It's a lingering question. If rail workers had been able to protest this, would this have been so bad? Would this have stopped?
Well, there's a lot of safety questions, right? Because by cutting those hours, you are also reducing the amount of time that you're checking the tracks to see if there are any aberrations or problems on the tracks. That time is now reduced or almost eliminated.
Yes.
So, and that we've heard right from the mouth of railway workers on that specific point.
Yes. Another government failure here is that the rail company responsible for this, Norfolk Southern, was obviously not in cahoots with the Environmental Protection Agency like they claim to be. There was no consensus or full disclosure to residents when they were told that it was safe to go back. I refer you to Tuesday's show for that discussion so we don't repeat ourselves. And the fact that lobbyists removed legislation that would have kept toxic chemicals from going through heavily populated civilian areas before that actually was a rule. Lobbyists they worked hard to pressure many presidencies. They've been at work for many presidencies for the profit, in the pursuit of profit. Actually, lobbyists were able to pressure both the Trump and Obama administrations to repeal safety measures. Here's a good summary, I thought, today. The Obama administration in 2014 proposed improving safety regulations for trains carrying petroleum and other hazardous materials. However, after industry pressure, the final measure ended up narrowly focused on the transport of crude oil and exempting trains carrying other combustible materials, including the chemicals involved in this weekend's disaster. Then in 2017, after rail donors delivered more than $6 million to GOP candidates, the Trump administration, backed by rail lobbyists and Senate Republicans, rescinded part of that rule, aimed at making better braking systems widespread on the nation's rails. Specifically, regulators killed provisions requiring rail cars carrying hazardous flammable material to be equipped with electronic braking systems to stop trains more quickly than conventional air brakes. In fact, Norfolk Southern had previously touted this technology for its potential to reduce train stopping distances by as much as 60%. Over conventional brake systems. But the lobby company nevertheless pressed for the rule's repeal, telling regulators that it would impose tremendous costs without providing offsetting safety benefits. And this argument won out with Trump officials, and the Biden administration has not moved to reinstate the brake rule or expand the kinds of trains subjected to tougher safety regulations. So you can see now, I've gone back 5 presidents. I've gone Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, right? They are all, none of them blameless. No party, no president.
No, they're all bought off by these guys. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? So they're all bought off by these guys. And we had a chance to speak with Nick Sordor, who is a video journalist. He's been in East Palestine now for a number of days. He was literally, I think, the first video journalist on the field there, and unbelievable sights and sounds that he saw there, choking, not being able to breathe properly, and just talking to local residents. So we caught up with him today as it started to snow in that area. And by the way, what's in that snow? Can you imagine the precipitation in that area, for crying out loud? So we had a chance to speak with Nick Sordor just a short time ago, and here's what he had to say. Watch. Well, we want to go down to Nick Sordor, who's been in East Palestine, Ohio for a number of days now, one of the first video journalists there on the scene when the major media outlets won't even cover the story. And now it seems like social media is maybe moving the needle in the right direction for people to get answers. Nick has been there for a few days, and he joined us a few days ago. Nick, what has changed in the few days since you've been there, talking to the people and seeing maybe the federal response or lack thereof? What have you seen?
So the pressure campaign that we started mounting once I got here on Tuesday has really boosted the hopes and morale of a lot of the residents here. At the time when I had gotten here, no cameras, no media, nothing. There's nobody here. The only journalist here walking around talking to people at the time. And then I started getting a lot of engagement on social media, trying to tell people what was going on the ground, and they got concerned because what I had seen before this through the media, and kudos to you were the first person to pick up on me while I was here. And once I had gotten here, I didn't know what to expect because the media hadn't been covering it for the 11 days before. They were worried about the balloons or whatever. I got here, and as soon as I got here, I could tell that it was much worse than anything that I had heard. The air quality was terrible. I was choking, my eye watering. And, a lot of people here were experiencing the same things. And they were having issues with, some of them with their lungs. People that have lung problems were having a really tough time with it. Nobody trusted anything the government had told them up until that point. The federal government was like nowhere to be found. But after this pressure campaign, they actually started sending people out here just to, the Biden administration sent out the EPA administrator, and both U.S. senators came yesterday. Why the EPA administrator didn't bother coming out to the worst environmental disaster in recent American history until Twitter blew up and independent journalists started really pushing it is beyond me. And that should tell you a lot about, what the people here are feeling.
What are the people telling you now? We know there was a town hall last night. Are they frustrated? They're being told, sounds like multiple stories, both from the Pete Buttigieg side, from the EPA, from the NTSB, from Norfolk Southern. It seems like they can't get straight answers from anybody.
Right. You're absolutely right. My client in particular, his story changes every day, seemingly. The other day, or last week especially, when he had declared that it was safe to come back in to the area here. That's exactly what he told people. So people came in, they came back in. A lot of them didn't want to, they were forced to anyway. And then he comes out, I believe 2 days ago, and says that, oh, well, maybe you should be drinking bottled water, which is totally contradictory from going last week and saying that everything was perfectly safe. Then you come out today and he says, oh, well, everything is perfectly fine. Tests indicate that there's nothing in the water at all. Okay, you got to make up your mind. What are you going off of? How do you keep going back and forth on that? That is what makes people not trust the government here, and that's why they're scared. There are people here that are taking showers with bottled water.
Jeez.
Which is just crazy. Because they can't get no straight story.
And I've heard you, in fact, offered the EPA administrator a glass of water, right? You offered him a glass of water because he'd been out kind of walking around all day. And you said, why don't you have some tap water? And what did he say to you?
Yep. He shook his head like this, just sort of like it was definitely a no. So he declined the water. He definitely didn't want to talk to me. We'll say that much.
Unbelievable. Have you noticed a lot of people coming back to their homes, or are they still staying away?
There's the people that can stay away are staying away. I have seen very few children in this town at all.
Wow.
You know, even at the town hall, you had, 900 people there, and no kids were there. I haven't seen kids in the street playing, not a single time actually.
Wow.
So, and that's disturbing to me. They're doing everything they can to not expose their kids to me.
Well, I know you've been working so hard there, and I know we've got kind of a choppy signal because you're dealing with Wi-Fi and terrible cell coverage in that area, so I really appreciate it. I wanted to see if it's possible, I know you're right near the creek bed there, if we could just pick up your camera and maybe walk down live here.
Couldn't hear you.
Oh, I was just asking you maybe if you could grab your camera here before we go and see if we can just walk down to the creek bed. I know where you're seeing some of the chemicals in the water there. Can you show us what you see? We might lose your signal. We're going to try this live here and see what happens here. If you're just able to walk with your camera and see what we can find in that creek that's down there, and see if we can see any trouble spots down there. If you're able to do that.
This is exactly where that video that a lot of people, actually about 12.6 million people have seen. So it's right here in this creek, and all I got to do is toss it right in the water. And then you see almost instantly, how, it oils up. There's chemicals all over. You can see the pools of coming over here as well. And it might be a little hard to see with the glare, but I'll go over here and it's worse. It's there. That was a small rock, and it pulls all of this all these chemicals out of here. You've got these barriers, right, that are supposed to be blocking this stuff out. But they're not. They're not effective at all, and they've been trying to cover this up now. They didn't want us to know this. They know this. There's no way they don't know this. All it takes is to toss a small rock in the water, and you discover all of these chemicals in it.
Unbelievable. Well, Nick, thank you so much for your coverage there. Thank you for what you're doing, bringing awareness to this story, arguably one of the worst disasters in American history. We'll see what the Biden administration does with FEMA, if there's more pressure from Congress on that side. Stay safe there. Thank you so much, and we'll check back with you soon as the story unfolds. Thanks so much, Nick. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Clayton. Appreciate you covering it as well.
Thank you. So thanks to Nick for what he's been doing there. And, he was saying that, people are taking showers with bottled water because they're just really concerned, obviously, about that. And we also see here, if you want to, Phil, take this, Rebel News reporting. Rebel News is there also now. Oops, sorry. I have that connected. Maybe you could take it up while we...
All right. So at this point, there has been no federal or FEMA response. And you can see how it would be much easier if you're the federal government to respond to things that are, you think are sort of out of your control or existential crisis. Like, oh, there's a big hurricane. Sure, the president will go. Oh, there's a big earthquake. The president will go because these are forces outside of our control. But when there are things to answer for, there's no politicians there to answer for it. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so Rebel News reporting that there are these devices scattered throughout East Palestine, these like air quality devices. There's now a class action lawsuit saying that there's long-term health implications with exposure to vinyl chloride, rare forms of liver cancer, other types of liver cancer, brain and lung cancers, lymphoma, and leukemia as well. And according to Zero Hedge, saying that in this lawsuit that that East Palestine residents may already be undergoing DNA mutations, according to the class action lawsuit. So. And we know what lawsuits, right? Let's just be fair here about what lawsuits can allege, right? Lawsuits in initial complaints can say a whole lot of bullshit, right?
Sure.
Let's be totally frank about that, right? So we don't want to be alarmist in that at all. But that's what first of all, you're putting a class action lawsuit together. That is a massive undertaking. And the amount of time, attention, and effort it takes to put something like that together, to level those types of charges, though, is pretty That's pretty big.
Yes, and they all have to have been harmed in the same way by the same incident.
Right.
And so there's a clear pivot point on what they were harmed from, what kind of negligence could be proved. And again, if the company can prove, like the data we were showing you on Tuesday, I believe, that look, if we hadn't let it out in this way, the whole town could have blown up and we would have no plaintiffs at all, they wouldn't be here, then that's something, right? And if residents can see that, we don't know how this could actually play out in a court of law. There were already 4 class action lawsuits by Tuesday, so now this next one.
Lawyers don't waste any time, do they?
Well, then could you do me a favor really quick, Clayton?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
You're both
I was just going to say, could you please run the clip of Pete Buttigieg and like what he's said about all this?
We
like,
are
could
going
you just
to get
run
to that, yeah.
Oh, there is actually a clip? I was trying to be funny because I didn't think there was one.
Oh no, we're gonna get to the calls for Pete Buttigieg to say words. We actually don't have any.
Okay.
You're right.
We don't have anything.
We don't have sound from him. We have a discussion about
him
not saying anything. Yeah.
Sorry, Philip.
Good point.
No, that's okay. I was just going to make the comparison. You look at something like a story like the Aaron Brockovich story, where it's you know, like with the people having the poison in their water. This is like that company was trying to be secretive about it. This company literally burnt the chemical in town.
Yeah.
And right. So it's like they know, they have the point source. Everybody knows about it. So you'd think that would like help spirit the class action lawsuit along, but also knowing how the court system works, it still won't.
No.
And it's just you know,
it'll drag on for a long time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of blame to go around on this, of course, and there's no federal or FEMA response. Here's what the White House, though, is saying about this. So Jean-Pierre was asked specifically about this. Listen.
I know the UK administrator was visiting East Palestine today. I was wondering, the Ohio governor was talking about efforts to federal support, said that they still have not gotten an indication from FEMA that they could get support at this point. What are the hurdles there that you guys see on the administration side?
So the governor, as you mentioned today, asked for additional public health testing and assessments. We're deploying teams from HHS and the CDC now. As you all know, these needs are much more expansive than what FEMA can meet. And so FEMA is on the front lines when there is a hurricane or tornado. As you know, you've seen the president visit devastated areas across the country. This situation is very different. And so that doesn't mean FEMA isn't supporting response. They indeed are. This is a multiple agency response that are folks that are involved, agency that are involved, as I just mentioned, HHS, CDC, EPA as well. And they are coordinating with the Emergency Operations Center and working closely with the Ohio Emergency Management Agency. Each federal agency has its own unique role here, and we've mobilized an interagency team to get the people of Palestine, of East Palestine to be more exact, the support that they need. And look, our priority, as I said 2 days ago, is the health and safety of the community. That is indeed our top priority for the moment as we look at what they're dealing with in Ohio.
Just one more on that.
Okay. FEMA can't meet that need. You know what, FEMA is pretty good. I've seen footage. They can bring water bottles.
Yeah. They can bring water. They can bring temporary
know how
housing.
To do that.
Like if your house is totally filled with chemicals. Let's listen now as we listen to the residents of East Palestine describe what it's like going back to their house and trying to open up a door and cleaning out. Like if their door, it's freezing, it's winter, right? So you don't have windows open anyway. So how's this stuff in the house? Listen to how these residents are describing going to the hospital, what they're experiencing going back into their houses. Watch.
Are you experiencing any symptoms?
A little lightheaded, and my lips did get all tingly yesterday when we went to clean up the house. It smells terrible up around the house, and there is black residue on the pictures, surface stuff.
I hit a cloud of something down in there that it put me in. I went to the hospital. They was worried about me having I've been so stressed out. They put me on an EKG thinking I'm going to have a freaking heart attack because of my stress being so high. I want to know what I sucked in.
I just feel like when I'm outside and the wind's blowing, try not to breathe in too heavily. After about 15, 20 minutes, my throat felt like there was gravel in it. I mean, it was just, I had a sore throat since then.
I vomit within 10 minutes of being in that home. The air is still terrible, absolutely terrible. I will not take my children in there because of that. Yeah. Burning of the eyes, trouble breathing. And then I just get nauseous within 10 minutes. My husband popped in to try to get anything, phone charger, things that they say are safe. You cannot get the smell out. It does not come out. My kids' friends said they lost cats. Their pets have been, sick. And then we have kids' friends who have rashes, and my daughter was one that also had a real bad, it looks almost like a sunburn.
EPA is letting us, giving us or not giving us any numbers. So they're just saying that the air is clean. We know, we've heard that before, 9/11. The water was fine in Flint, Michigan, different things. So that is in the back of your head.
They told me they were going to do an air quality test. Never got a call back. 3 times, 3 different agents from that number said they were coming to do an air quality test.
If I could, I would definitely move.
I'm old. I'm not ready to die, but I hope I don't have any after effects is what worries me.
A lot of white people there. Maybe that's what the Biden administration is staying away. Pete Buttigieg is not really concerned about that whole town of white people doesn't fit into his diversity plan.
What are you saying? It's a racist response?
Well, I think clearly this is not in their wheelhouse. Like if this was Chicago or if this was New York City, they'd be all over this. But because it's it's flyover country for them, they don't care. And you're just watching this response unfold in this way. I mean, how else can you describe it? You're literally not showing up, not putting in the resources that you would need to help these people.
Right, because
they're
Flint,
not your
Michigan,
voters.
and Flint water, which disproportionately affected black people, became a campaign talking point.
Of course. I
mean,
mean,
we really care about, disenfranchised black voters.
Right.
So Pete Buttigieg, so we can't be shown to be compassionate to, white people is what you're saying?
The thing, like one thing to point out though is so likely this gas is more dense than air. And because of that, it can't just float up into the atmosphere and clear itself out. The air will actually hold it at that level, at ground level, which means like this, it's not just gonna it will eventually clear out, but it's gonna linger for a long time.
Oh.
Yeah, and this is the prop. So when they're saying that this could be one of the worst ecological disasters in American history, they're not being glib. They're not being alarmist. They're saying we don't know the level and by the way, Norfolk Southern is also, according to reports, fudging these results. They're in charge of their own testing. That's like putting Pfizer in charge of vaccine trials. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. Wonder how that goes.
Well, and also they have no idea how far out it goes either. Like it was airborne for some time. So how far did that smoke plume go? Like it could be hundreds of miles from there. I mean, I saw reports of 100 miles of fish being dead and stuff.
Well, we're hearing people in our chat now who have family at 20 miles away from East Palestine who have been writing in our chat tonight saying they have friends in Lisbon, Ohio, and other spots that are where their animals have died. Families have been sick as a result of it.
How far do you think your hometown of Reading, Pennsylvania is?
Oh, I mean, I was,
because it's not far from Pittsburgh.
4.5 hour drive from Pittsburgh was where my hometown was. So it's far. But yeah, you don't know where the wind goes. You don't know how it affects the waters. I mean, so anyway, the problem is that these people just don't know. They're not getting straight answers. So on the one hand, there's no, don't, it's not safe. And the next time they're like, yeah, drink the water. Now they're saying, now don't drink the water. Here's, you should get bottled water. It's like, and you're going to bring your kids back to this to go back to school. It's not like everyone can just pick up and move. Like they've got bags of money that they can just oh, fine, I'll just move to another. I'll just go buy a house over there.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Vedger just sent a super chat saying U.S. government doesn't even have the economic resources to fix the East Palestine incident's aftermath, but they are fully prepared to go into a full-out World War III with China and Russia. Let that make sense.
Right. What's Philip trying to say?
Well, I was going to say the thing is they could absolutely know how bad it is. They could find out exactly how far it stretches if they sent people out there to gather the data. So the fact that they're not sending people out there to gather the data, to me, looks like what they're doing is they're waiting for most of it to clear out before they go out and get the numbers so that they can justify the fact that they said it's already safe.
Yeah.
So it's just sort of like it's a way of sweeping it under the rug. Because if you have the hard data, then people can point to the hard data, and that makes it look like they botched the job. So the best way to handle that on their part is just to not show up until everything's mostly cleared out anyway.
So but you said this earlier, President Biden is going to be supporting, announced today they're going to be supporting Ukrainian pensions.
Oh, yes.
So let's listen to this.
Okay.
Here, I have this here. If we can take this on my laptop.
And assistance as well as food, water, medicine, shelter, and other aid to Ukrainians displaced by Russia's war, and provide aid for those seeking refuge in other countries from Ukraine. It's also going to help schools and hospitals open. It's going to allow pensions and social support to be paid to the Ukrainian people so they have something in their pocket. It's also going to provide critical resources to address food shortages around the globe and to deliver much needed humanitarian assistance.
Pensions, he says. Now, I want you to recall recently that the federal government has said that they think they can pay out Social Security pensions for the foreseeable future, but they may have to stop paying survivor benefits. So let's say you stayed home in order to support your husband to go to work, and then you are living on a survivor benefit because he has since passed. Screw you, you don't get that anymore. He's gone, right? Your survivor benefit may just go away because the United States cannot support it, but they have decided that they can support Ukrainian pensions because that government is imploding and they can't support their own pensions. Does that seem right to you?
Is that really?
No, well,
yeah.
I guess what needs to happen is, since Putin already increased our gas prices, if Putin would just attack the United States, invade here, then maybe people would get their pensions and keep their Social Security, because then the American people would need the money.
Yeah, then we'd mobilize.
Perhaps. Now, White House spokesperson Jean-Pierre was asked about Governor DeWine of Ohio. He has said, yeah, we're there, we're working on it. He's putting out statements as well on Twitter. He's not physically there, but he's saying words. I think this was a pretty relevant response to his tweet. He's saying, I spoke with the White House early this morning to address the need for federal help. As a result of this conversation, I've requested assistance from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and all of these people that she did say were coming. I thought this response was fair. How is it that the guy who gave Ohio a nonsense 10 p.m. COVID curfew total response thus far has just to tell us to drink more bottled water? So, he was all in on COVIDism, as if COVID stopped at 10 p.m. You needed to go home at 10 p.m. But about this, he's just calling in departments, acronyms and initialisms of the federal government, but not there himself. There was an emotional town meeting on Wednesday. No one from Norfolk Southern showed up. Here's the town meeting where people you can see, have their hand in the air. Lots of questions, no answers. What Norfolk Southern did say was that it would create another $1 million fund to help the community of some 4,700 people while continuing to remediate the work, including removing spilled contaminants. It will also expand how many residents can be reimbursed for their evacuation costs, covering this entire village and surrounding, because they did tell them to get out for just a few short days while they said the explosion will be loud and visible. So where they went, how did that cost money, gas money, maybe hotel money. You couldn't cook at home, eating out. Meanwhile, there was another Norfolk Southern trail derailment in the Detroit area, although we are told that there was no hazardous materials in this train.
But if it's Detroit, so they'll be all over that to make sure they take care of that immediately. Meanwhile, where is Pete Buttigieg? That's the question. And Marco Rubio says, what more do you need as an example to have a guy be impeached or fired? This guy should be kicked out of office immediately. Here's what Senator Marco Rubio said about Pete Buttigieg. Watch.
And I don't know what the guy needs to do to get fired, because he's been asleep at the switch, no pun intended, his entire time in office. Whether it's meltdowns at the FAA, whether it's what happened with Southwest Airlines, now this derailment of toxic chemicals. But his job is to make sure that not only is our system of transportation in this country reliable, but that it is safe.
So there you go. Will Mayor Pete be the one that falls on the sword? Will he be the one that the Biden administration says, yeah, he's the scapegoat? All of this, they'll push him out, and that'll be the one.
He wasn't watching the trains.
Yeah.
The trains don't run on time.
Train spotting. All right, we've got more news to get to on this Friday, the special Friday edition. Let's dive into it. We're going to talk about NATO in space. So let's do that. So NATO is launching a new space fleet. All the timing of this is just amazing, isn't it? So it's amazing to me that right as we're hearing this whole UFO flap about all of the Chinese invasion of balloons and everything else coming into the United States, that NATO suddenly, as we've been predicting, launches a space fleet that's going to take care of our UFO problem and our Chinese balloon problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have more?
I do. I mean, this is. I'm trying to load this thing, but it's.
I know. I my notes also are not loading on this.
It's just like Clown World stuff to me. Like the show Space Force, I think was on Apple. I don't know what it was on. I actually enjoyed that show, but it's like, this is now a reality. We are starting a global space force, and it just. I don't know. It just, I want it to be fake.
No, it's real, because NATO has announced, according to the reports, a new space project that aims to create a fleet of spy satellites. The initiative, which includes NATO, applicants Sweden and Finland, involves not only national but commercial assets. The project, which is called Alliance, Persistent Surveillance from Space, was unveiled Wednesday with a total of 6...
Ass?
It's called, it's ASS. It's called ASS with a P in it. Apps. Okay. Their new project is called ASS, which unveiled on Wednesday with a total of 16 current member states expected to chip in, according to a statement published on NATO's website. The project will help streamline data collection, sharing, and analysis among NATO allies with a NATO command culture or structure. Sweden and Finland, which are not NATO members of NATO, applied for NATO, but they're not there yet. But they will be approved, I guess, be a part of the Space Force, even though they're not part of NATO. Like, this is ridiculous.
It's like, they're pledging the sorority, but they still have to go to the events, because they've already committed. Yes, we want to start monitoring space and be the protectors of space. I mean, what they're saying they're going to do is help streamline data collection and share analysis among NATO allies. Like, on what exactly? Because we already have NASA to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and we promise we're not going to look at non-NATO data. Like, we're not going to be collecting that. Don't worry. We're only going to, our allies, those of you that aren't in NATO, don't worry. You're safe.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, and again, this is, of course, NATO is saying, well, no, it's our concerns are Russia and China in space. I mean, they're basically saying this, like it's Russia and China in space, so that's why we need to increase our defensive capabilities in space now. And this is where the endless open budget goes. We've been predicting this, the fake alien invasion, of course, when the Space Force was launched under Trump, I said, what a load of crap this is. And then it was continued under Biden, because you're never going to pull back on the military industrial complex. The Space Force, we were all making fun of it. It's not about exploring space. All it is another big money grab for the military industrial complex, which is already making $1 trillion basically per year. And now we're going to give them more money to go and, to protect us in space against Russia and China.
Right.
Well, and again, like I said, it gives them an invisible boogeyman. They've now got an invisible boogeyman that we can't verify. Endless funds.
Yeah, we can't audit this.
Well, NATO has said that Russia and China are, continuing to advance in space, and that it is making it more crowded and competitive. They said that Moscow and Beijing's counter space technologies could restrict allies' access to and freedom to operate in space, which I just would like to point out, space is infinite.
Right.
So there should not be a competition for infinite space.
No, but this is the beauty of their budget. It's infinite. So they will forever expand. No, we got to keep expanding. It'll start as the moon base, and then it'll expand to Mars. Now we're worried. They literally said this. We're worried about China going to Mars. Okay.
We got to get there first.
So we got a friggin' train derailment in the United States with toxic chemicals leaching into water, and we're concerned about China on Mars. Go ahead, Philip.
I would like to point out, though, that we are spending taxpayer dollars on Space Force. We don't have spaceships. So what exactly, like...
But all these guys are walking around in uniforms. These dumbasses are walking around in uniforms, right? I mean, they're like, I'm a member of Space Force, and I had to go to basic
ready
training
at a moment's notice.
Like, what are you doing? Playing F-Zero on the on the Super Famicom, or what? Like, I'm in Space Force. Idiots.
Like, they're terrestrial based. We don't have any spaceships. Like, we don't have any Space Force members on the International Space Station. So they don't have their own space base.
Well, you don't know that.
Well,
I
yeah,
mean, they
exactly.
may have. It could be part of the secret space program. You know, a couple of people wrote me the other day, like, Clayton, are you aware of the secret space program? And we don't necessarily want to dive into it here, but oh yeah, I'm aware of it, the secret space program. So maybe we're not seeing these ships, and they're part of the secret space program.
Or maybe they're really making beaming a real possibility. We could just beam there, and then we don't need the ships.
How great would that be? That's where you could put your money, like. You know, Dr. McCoy never liked it in Star Trek because he didn't like his molecules being scattered across the universe. But if it could save me 6 hours on a flight and I could just like teleport there.
But then, and like Spaceballs, you get your ass backwards.
Yeah, it goes, yeah. You have a tail on your front.
And also you get that the theory of like teleportation where you're actually recreating yourself as a clone and then just destroying the other one. So like every time you teleported, essentially like the old you would just die horribly, and then the new you would have no memory of that. So just something to think about.
Well, and think about too, like they have if there is any kind of alien invasion and they're on the outskirts of where our planes and jets can go, like we don't have a fleet that we can deploy. You know, like deploy the space fleet to go just outside the Earth's atmosphere and take care of all of those ships.
And there's also just a little bit of like, you know, jumping on the trampoline of what we can get out of Russian hate. Like, oh, let's say Russia and China are there. Okay, let's do this then, power grab. Okay, Russia and China are also in nuclear power. Yes, let's capitalize on that too. Like, this is just the next thing. You know, there's no need to turn space into a battlefield at this point.
No, and I feel like whenever I say this, like maybe it falls on deaf ears. I don't know. When I say this on the show, it infuriates me that there's no check on this at all. Like, and I say it, and I almost feel like, am I just speaking to myself here? Because we're spending $1 trillion on a military defense budget to kill other people, right? That's instead of helping people in the United States or around the world. Instead, we spend this money on a military industrial complex, and no one seems to give a shit. And no one is calling for it to end. We have a big rally in Washington, D.C. this weekend, the Rage Against the War Machine rally. Redacted will be there covering it. But again, how few voices are like anti-war, anti-military industrial complex. No one in Congress is stopping it, and it just keeps expanding. Now it's going to space, for crying out loud.
Well, and if you didn't have a goal of it being a bad thing, like it wouldn't be called Space Force. It could be called Space Fleet or something like that. Something that's not like force, because that just tells you that it is a military, like we're going out there with force. We're not going out there to learn anything, to make friends. We're going to go out there and with force.
Or Starfleet. I just came up with that.
Yeah.
Just came up like
I
totally
came
original.
up with Space Camp.
Brilliant.
Space Camp. Brilliant. Thank you. So to round out this story, we now have an update on the balloons that we've been shooting down, because, you know, they were deadly balloons that were infiltrating the United States, or then they became UFOs. And so we don't know what they are, but they're really awful. Well, now we know. And it turns out the United States may have shot down a small hobby balloon with a Sidewinder missile. Yes, a kids club, a kids hobby club that flies balloons. You know how like you used to go out in the field and shoot up little rockets as a kid?
No.
Like the Essex rockets. Do you remember did you guys ever shout those out in the field? Like, oh, we used to do those.
Oh yeah, I sure did.
Or is it Essex? What were they called? Not Essex. I don't know.
I don't know the brands. I just remember we just referred to them as model rockets. But
like like a hobby club. But that's what these people do. They have like a hobby club, and so these kids are like, we don't know where our balloon went. And it turns out it was likely destroyed by a $400,000 Sidewinder missile by NORAD. Like these kids shooting down like a kid's hobby club.
Man, I feel sorry for Santa this next year.
Oh yeah, that's right. You better look out, man. Those reindeers, man. Those better look out. Oh,
well, I'd say this is a really good example of why you shouldn't shoot something you can't identify. You know what it is yet? Don't spend your $40,000 missile taking it out of the sky.
Yeah, $400,000.
400,000.
Yeah, and by the way, the money and intention to scramble those jets, right? To put one of those jets up in the air is like what, $25,000 to scramble a jet?
45. Oh yeah, maybe to scramble, but $45,000 an hour in fuel.
Whoa!
To shoot down a hobby balloon.
Oh my gosh!
Kids, Should never, don't launch your balloons over sacred airspace again. We've got more news to get to on this Friday. We're going to talk about this New York Times revolt. A lot of people are upset at the New York Times for actually maybe doing something correct for once in a number of years.
Yeah.
On trans issues. Like, the New York Times has been calling out all these trans surgeries, and boy, trans activists and their own reporters are not happy about it. So we'll talk about that. The CEO of YouTube is resigning. It's curious timing because Congress has sent out a whole host of subpoenas to try to find out how big tech has been censoring people. And I can't wait till we find out what YouTube has been doing to people. That's going to be fantastic. So the CEO of YouTube said, I'm going to leave. I'm going to resign before all that happens, like the Twitter files. But first, I want to tell us about our friends over at HelloFresh. I'm going to do that. So thanks for being a valued partner of our HelloFresh team here. If you love great food delivered right to your door, and you can save a lot of money right now. I mean, look, we're seeing inflationary prices skyrocketing, food prices skyrocketing, grocery store prices up 11%. Up 11% just to go to the grocery store. It's up 8% if you want to go out to eat. With HelloFresh, you're able to save a lot of money off that grocery store price because HelloFresh is able to do farm to table and cut out the middleman right to your front door. So, if you had those New Year's Eve goals of like preparing like fresh meals for your family, easy recipes, fresh ingredients, HelloFresh can help you keep on track with your New Year's resolutions. Get HelloFresh and skip that extra trip to the grocery store. Not only are you saving money from what you would spend at the grocery store, it's cheaper than going to the grocery store. You'll actually save the gas money on going to the grocery store. And you don't have to deal with being there for an hour and a half, walking up and down the aisles as well. You get chef-crafted recipes delivered right to your doorstep. They have 40 weekly recipes to choose from, so you can say bye-bye to that recipe rut if you can't come up with something new and fresh. So with HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients, seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip the trips to the grocery store. Count on HelloFresh. You got to use that URL. You'll get 65% off right now. That's a lot. 65% off right now. HelloFresh is delicious. Our kids love doing the recipes, getting the recipe cards, and really it takes very little time at all to put these recipes together, and it really is empowering for your family to kind of come together. Go to HelloFresh.com/redacted65. You have to use that code redacted65 to get 65% off plus free shipping. So you get free shipping and 65% off. Try it right now. Go to HelloFresh.com/redacted65 and use that code redacted65 for 65% off plus free shipping. It's America's #1 meal kit. So thanks to HelloFresh.
All right. Well, trans activists are the subject of debate right now, and their main issue is around the New York Times. On Wednesday, a group of 200 writers published a letter to the paper stating concerns over the paper's coverage of trans issues. And then the very next day, the paper featured a story about trans rights activists' public enemy #1, J.K. Rowling. She is, of course, the author of the Harry Potter novels, amongst other things. And what? I've heard of her. Have you? The letter by writers takes issue with how the paper has what they say, quote, vilified transness as a disease to be feared. Now, I'm confused by this because gender dysphoria is, in fact, considered a mental health disorder. So maybe they should take that up with the American Psychological Association. They do actually define gender identity disorder as a person who identifies with a separate gender than what they were born. And in fact, they exhibit extreme discomfort and distress by their gendered body. It is a diagnosis. So fear is a choice we all have when they say that, they are presenting transness as a disease to be feared. Well, that's your choice, whether you're afraid of it or not, but they're presenting it as the disorder as that it is. But, again, this is why they demand medicine and medical care, because it is, in fact, a disorder. That it's a real disorder that requires professionals. The writers say that the Times cover this like something to be feared, but I guess, they're thinking that you don't have a range of emotions to choose from, and they're telling you how you feel. You feel afraid. The writers also take issue with the paper's coverage of medical interventions. They say that puberty blockers, hormone replacement therapy, and gender-affirming surgeries have been standard forms of care for cis and trans people alike for decades. That's a lie. It's not true. There are no standards of care. Most doctors prescribing hormones use it kind of like the Clinique counter. Like, are you getting boobs enough? Are you getting facial hair enough? Let's up or down your medicine. There is not like, you are this age and weight, you should have this much. Most of the medicine that they prescribe are used, for instance, for cancer patients or for other serious disease. It is absolutely not been used for gender dysphoria for decades. So for them to say that, for instance, they took issue with the Emily Bazelton. She's from the Slate Political podcast. Bazelon. Yeah, she wrote about the sort of contraindications of these drugs, and she pointed out quite rightly that it can cause hair loss to be on these hormones. That's just the fact. And they said, oh, you're covering this negatively. And I felt like she only just kind of mentioned it as an aside, like one person detransitioned, she said in the piece, because they were losing their hair and didn't want to anymore. And that can sometimes happen. And she didn't follow up on any of the other negative side effects of these drugs, such as, osteoporosis, and memory loss and loss of puberty, and I'm going to talk about those a little bit more. Again, the New York Times has not responded to this letter, but instead they put out this piece about J.K. Rowling, saying that this is an opinion piece, but they say that nothing Rowling has ever said qualifies as transphobic. I agree with them. They say she is not disputing the existence of gender dysphoria. She's never voiced opposition to allowing people to transition under evidence-based therapeutic and medical care. She is not denying trans people equal pay or housing. There is no evidence that she is putting trans people in danger, nor is she denying their right to exist. This is what the New York Times is saying, and I am applauding the New York Times. I agree. Here are a few notable pieces.
I can't believe we'd actually side with the New York Times.
Yeah, I'm willing to do this because
this is crazy. Like they're actually taking a stand on this.
I can't believe that they published this because of how hard it is to say these things. Here is a bit from this piece. One of her former critics, E.J. Rosetta, a journalist who once denounced Rowling for her supposed transphobia, was commissioned last year to write an article called 20 Transphobic J.K. Rowling Quotes We're Done With. And after 12 weeks of reporting and reading, Rosetta wrote, "I've not found a single truly transphobic message." On Twitter, she declared, "You're burning the wrong witch." And this writer who wrote this New York Times opinion piece said, "For the record, I too read all of Rowling's books, including the crime novels written under the pen name Robert Galbraith, and came up empty-handed."
Wow.
And so, they're looking for it. They can't find it. She says, quote from J.K. Rowling, she says, "The pushback is often people say to her, 'You're wealthy, you can afford security, you haven't been silenced.' All true, but I think that misses the point. The attempt to intimidate and silence me is meant to serve as a warning to other women with similar views who may wish to speak out. And I say that because I have seen it used this way," she says. "When other women speak, they've been warned, look what happened to J.K. Rowling, watch yourself. Like, if you say these things, you don't have a security guard. You don't have the, cushy safety net of all of these book royalties. So you better STFU because this would hurt you in a way they cannot hurt her." She has been speaking lately, which she usually does not. She says very little. She was not even in the 20th Harry Potter reunion HBO special. They only played like clips of her from years past, and I was heartbroken over this.
Yeah, same.
So yeah, she never comes out. She does not want to. She says things that I think are thoughtful and calculated. She does things with her money, which again, I think are thoughtful and calculated, but she never comes out and speaks very much. But she has been speaking because of this new podcast coming out with a writer named Megan Phelps Roper, which is called The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. We've decided to play you the 90-second trailer of the podcast.
Why do you like Harry Potter?
It's a story about acceptance and love.
Like, I had not such a great childhood, and I think a kid with not such a great childhood actually escaped to something else in a book.
Teaches, the importance of friendships, the importance of forgiveness.
The way people pull together, they're different. They don't all exactly agree with one another, but they can say, okay, this is the common good, and this is what we're going to work for.
What do you think of J.K. Rowling?
So there's a lot of controversy with that one.
So I have a comment I'll say off the thing.
Let me.
I never set out to upset anyone. However, I was not uncomfortable with getting off my pedestal. And what has interested me over the last 10 years, and certainly in the last few years, the last 2-3 years, particularly on social media, you've ruined your legacy. Oh, you could have been beloved forever, but you chose to say this. And I think you could not have misunderstood me more profoundly.
I'm Megan Phelps Roper, and coming soon, The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, I'm in for this, but I have long supported J.K. Rowling because I don't think what she's saying is transphobic. I think that what she's asking us to do is think through the nuances of supporting trans righs and what it does to women's rights.
Yeah.
And what she has consistently said is trans people should be free and exist, but they should not impinge on women's rights. And now, because of even just the title of this podcast, Phelps Roper, the host, has become trans enemy number 2 because she called this a witch trial, which it has the connotation of someone who's wrongfully accused.
Yeah.
People will not even debate the merit of what she says. They just want to burn her at the stake, basically. And now, because of the way they think that this is going to maybe abscond her, they don't want it because they need her as like the sort of pin around which trans rights activists can work themselves into a frenzy and call her hateful without actually debating the words.
And it really upset me when I saw the cast, like Daniel Radcliffe and them come out against her, because I just recently watched an interview that she did years ago with Daniel Radcliffe, and it's like they were interviewing each other. And the adoration she had for those characters and those kids, like she was like so concerned with like the fame that they got, and they would not be where they are today without her. And the fact that they didn't do their due diligence and do that, like that just really upsets me, because it's like, you're right, they like need an enemy, but for what? Like, why do they need that? And the thing is, like, why would you take somebody that hasn't done that and make them an enemy when she's actually an ally? If you look at what she says, she is actually an ally.
Well, because they love tearing people down, right? This is, it's the great story. Someone has enormous success, and then you're going to have trolls. You're going to have people that want to bring people down. That's why People magazine sells, right? That's why these tabloid magazines sell, right? Because
but there's a lesson here about maturity, because the actors who have come out in support of her, Helena Bonham Carter and Ralph Fiennes, were the adults in the room,
right?
And the kids, the actors who played the kids, have said the less mature thing, in my opinion. I mean, they're like 30 now.
Although Hagrid, what's his name? I don't forget the character, the actor that played Hagrid.
Just died.
He just passed away, but he also came out in support of her.
I didn't know that.
And then when he died, people were like, thank God that transphobe died. I'm like, really? Because he supported what J.K. Rowling said about women's rights? He's I mean,
people have been fired for just liking her
her
tweets. I mean, she's become that hot button. So, I mean, but she's got Voldemort on her side. So that's a good thing. Now, I want to bring you this update, speaking of trans rights, about this legislation introduced in Maryland that would get Medicare to cover trans hormones and surgery. Medicare and Medicaid already do this in Oregon, but this new bill would prevent healthcare professionals also from issuing adverse determination about gender-affirming treatment. So you can read it here. It's talking about providing medically necessary gender-affirming treatment in a non-discriminatory manner. The part that gives me pause here is in the middle here where you see it picks up prohibiting the program from issuing an adverse benefit determination related to gender-affirming treatment unless a healthcare provider with experience providing or prescribing gender-affirming treatment has reviewed and confirmed the appropriateness of the determination. So do you think this means that a healthcare provider cannot tell children that the treatments may be adverse to their body unless that only certain people can say this? So let's say you're a nurse and you may see, before you consider this, like these hormones can cause memory loss and osteoporosis and sterility and weight gain. And, that people who say those things are prohibited now unless they are specific doctors only. That's what that says to me.
Lupron, which is the drug that's used, is actually used in prisons to castrate some prisoners. I don't know if I can say the word. The P word.
Yes, it is.
And also, I saw a girl that was talking, and she did a video. She's a detransitioner. This is just the other day, and she said when she first went to Planned Parenthood, they got her because she was having gender dysphoria and she was hanging out with friends and she was like, yeah, I think I could be trans. They're saying like, you're definitely trans. You need to go do something. And she just got kind of, thinking, okay, I must be. So she went to Planned Parenthood and they got her on testosterone the following day and then started pressuring her to get the surgeries. Like, you need to start getting ready for the surgeries. We need to get you going like ASAP. Like no evaluation or anything. The next day she was on testosterone.
So what this language says to me, though, is that because there was the first real whistleblower out of, I think it was Kansas, it might have been, or Missouri, just this week, who said, look, we were giving these kids these hormones and they were getting worse. Their mood swings were getting worse. Their relationship with their family is getting worse. Their depression is getting worse because no one's saying that these things will be solved by, changing your body to slowly look like something else. Like, those things persist and more fixated on what they look like rather than less. And she said, we're hurting these kids. They're having all kinds of medical problems. I wish that I had maybe said something to them. And so it seems to me that this legislation is written to prohibit anyone who has seen these adverse effects of what's happening to these children's bodies. They wouldn't be able to say it. Is that what you read from this, guys? Prohibiting the program from issuing adverse benefit determination? So you can't say like, well, the benefit is you'll start to get some boobs, but you may still be depressed and your weight gain will redistribute to your hips and you will start to have memory loss and you may lose your hair and have osteoporosis. That you could not say that?
No, you're not allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, because I think the thinking is if we try to talk them out of it, they might off themselves, right? Because it's like, that's the thing. They're like, if you don't do this, you will end up potentially offing yourself.
Yes, but that's very suggestive. And that's a whole other thing that you should never be.
I'm just saying the reasoning that they're trying not to push the.
And it's kind of crazy if you listen to, there's a fabulous podcast of a woman who's critical of the psychological standards right now in dealing with gender dysphoria. She's like, never in any other case do we tell people, oh, we'll deal with this so that you don't, harm yourself or end your life. Like, would you tell this to a widow? Like, oh, we better deal with this so you don't go and end your life. Or would you tell this to an anorexic? Or would you tell this to, like, this is the only place where we're like, well, we better deal with this so that you don't end your life. It makes no sense. Like, and it's a smoking gun. As soon as you say it, it's in the room. right? And the child will say it too and has learned to say it.
Well, it looks to me like the wording is saying that there's no prohibition on touting the benefit of it, but you have to have a specialist like say the negatives. So it's like, you don't need that specialist to tout. So it would be like if you take not something that's similar, but if you look at like something like oxycodone, if the person prescribing it could only say this will take care of all of your pain, and then they're not allowed to mention the fact that it's a narcotic and highly addictive.
Right.
If they're not allowed to say that, they're like, but like unless they get to that point where they need that other person to come in and be like, now I'm an actual professional and I'm saying that there could be problems. It's weird. It's opening up the idea that you can only speak the benefits, but unless you're like state certified to speak the negatives, you're not allowed to.
Yeah. And so think of a nurse that has to come in and give you this and know, okay, gay child, I'm about to sterilize you. Here you go. That I find this language extremely troubling, and seems to me that it was written from a pharmaceutical company.
Of course, because of course it was. Of course it was written by a pharmaceutical company. Let us know your thoughts on this in the chat below. Was it written by a pharmaceutical company? Where do you stand on this? Will you listen to this J.K. Rowling podcast to educate yourself on that position? I think it'll be a fascinating interview. Since she never speaks, she never does interviews, it would be interesting to hear from that. We've got more news to get to here on this special Friday night edition. Thanks to all of you guys for joining us. We really appreciate it. We have the Rumble chat going up here. Thanks to everyone on Rumble right now joining us on Rumble. Upwards of 17,000 of you watching us on Rumble. Thank you very much. Nice to see all of you. Texas Duke. Liberty 177. Nice to see all of Amy Bella. My eyes are so bad. I need to put on my spectacle for this. But we're going to be moving over to Rumble for our next couple of stories, because these next stories are likely not going to be very favorable to YouTube, specifically talking about the resignation of the CEO of YouTube. So anyway, we're going to be moving over to Rumble for that story in just a moment. So please come on over. Our Rumble URL is rumble.com/redacted. The stream will continue over on Rumble, censorship free. So come on over to Rumble. And sometimes people wonder, like, do we censor comments? No, the answer is no, we don't. Sometimes I see this in a comment field sometimes where people are like, hey, I just typed this thing in it and YouTube deleted it. Yeah, that's what happens. So I don't know what they're doing. Does Rumble do that? I don't think so. Do we know if Rumble does that too yet, or
no? Rumble does not do anything.
Oh, good. Well, anyway, so rumble.com/redacted is the place to go. Come on over to our Rumble channel. We're going to say goodbye to our YouTube audience right now. Thank you guys for joining us on YouTube as well, but come on over to Rumble. The stream will continue.